280. A few people passed in the UK last year as well. So I think we're somewhere near 282, 285, something like that.
How many countries?
Oh, God. I know Japan has the youngest master sommelier, period. The guy is like 24 years old, which is pretty insane. But they also, every other country has had a leg up on us because they can start drinking earlier, right? So
right,
you can't even start taking your intro until you're 21.
I was so bitter. I was so bitter that when I met, I had an intern come in 2010 at Clos Pepe. Of course, he was from Chablis, and I make stainless steel Chardonnay, and it ended up being the ripest vintage in the history of the Santa Rita Hills. So I'm like, oh, I'm all about elegance and restraint. Like, I want to teach you how we make California wine with a soul. And we're bringing in Chardonnay at like, 27 bricks.
Right.
So, I mean, it was what it was. It was a good conversation, and it was wonderful too. So it's about 5 o'clock. So let's fire this up. Yeah. Adrian, Peter Rogers, man, he remembers everything. He's got a brain like a trap. I think if anyone could get to level 3, or I don't know if you'd ever want to be a master, but certainly Peter Rogers remembered very, very well. Yeah, Adrian.
I asked everybody to raise their hand at every single intro course how many people are going to be a master sommelier, because I was that guy when I went to my intro and I was raising my hand. And I like to see, it's 2 or 3 people, and I can't say I would remember everybody, but I'd like to see somebody actually show up and do it. Say, hey, you asked me, am I going to be a master in my intro? And here I am, however many years later.
Well, I mean, we're definitely in the age of inclusiveness and in the age of trying to right wrongs. I understand about 75% of current master sommeliers are male, but many, many more of the level 3s looking to become masters. Is there an idea when you might see parity within the court?
Say that last part, you broke up.
Oh no, I'm sorry. When maybe there'll be, do you think there'll ever be an equal amount of female and male master sommeliers?
If you look at the last few advanced courses, which are very much a precursor for what we want to see at the master exam, right? Because we made the advanced not harder, but we asked more of the candidates to be prepared for when they finally get to the master. There are points where we are at least 50%, and in some case more women who are passing the advanced than men, which, to me, I don't necessarily look at the gender of the person who is able to accomplish such a great feat of passing the advanced, but I definitely love seeing more women there for sure. And I mean, at whatever point there are more women masters than men, I will be perfectly comfortable with that too.
Totally. Now,
we have a bunch of seats on the board, and the more people who are on the board to bring different perspectives, the better.
I did read a study out of the University of Edinburgh that basically said that their belief and their studies show that women have slightly better olfactory senses than men. Have you read anything on that?
Yeah, I've heard it, and they say that more women are super tasters too, so they can taste bitterness in less quantity, and it's more abundant for them. The thing is, when you pass the master exam, it's more about using your deductive tasting ability. Do you know what malolactic tastes like? Do you know what stem inclusion tastes like? Do you know what French and American oak the differences are and what percentage? Do you know what a ripe vintage tastes like? All of those kind of things. Do you know what oxidation of 5-year-old and 10-year-old Sauvignon Blanc tastes like? Mm-hmm. That's more about what it is at the master exam. Yes, if you have more olfactory ability because you are a woman, you are going to have maybe a slight advantage, but I really just think it's about how much effort and time you've put in. And that's proven by the number of people who passed, which is 280 something, right?
Yeah. And I was going to put this in your speed round, but for every one master sommelier on the planet, there's 100 people that have gone into space.
I would switch with them.
Well, we'll get into that. First of all, let's back up a little bit. What I would love for you to give just a couple minutes, a little bit about your story. Like, who are you? Where are you from? I know that San Diego County is going to come into play, but let us know. Give us a little background about who you are.
Yeah, so I grew up in San Diego in California. I was there from 1988 until 2012. I actually went to school in one little town, all in like elementary school, middle school, high school. It's called Mira Mesa. I love Mira Mesa because it is one of the most unique, amalgamated for culture and ethnicity, and like just one of the most beautiful places. It's right next to Miramar, which was at one point an air base, and now it's a Marine base. But yeah, I mean, I grew up on one long street called Avenida del Gato. I moved from when I was in like 7th grade down to the end of the other end of the street and lived on the same street pretty much. I went to Mira Mesa High School. I went to college in San Diego at Cal State San Marcos with the goal of when I had graduated high school, I was going to be a private pilot. When I was 18 years old, I knew that I was going to go to college only to get a college degree so that I could move on and get my airline transport pilot, which is what you have to do to fly a 737, a 747, an Airbus A380, which was my ultimate goal. And along the way, went through Palomar College and learned how to fly planes. I got my commercial rating, my multi-engine, my instrument. I was working on getting type rated in a CJ1, which is a jet. And all of that required some time extra money in my pocket. I got lucky and I bought a Lexus SC400, which was my favorite car. I loved it. My dad.
Was that like the one of the first like space looking cars?
It's very long nose on
Yes.
it. And it's a V8, and it was an awesome car to have when gas was like $1.10 a gallon. And you know, I didn't have much money, but I got it for like $9,800. My dad got it from someone who, you know, some like a water pump was done with it, and she's like, I don't want to fix it here. How much will you give me for it? And so I took that and I refinanced it over and over and over again. This is when I don't even know if you can refinance a car anymore. And I would take it back to the bank, San Diego County Credit Union, and say, hey, do you want to give me $7,800 for my car? They would give me a loan for my car. I'd have cash in my bank account. I would go fly, pay off my car loan, refinance it again. Now it's depreciated, so I got $5,800 instead, do it again. And all of that time I needed extra money. So when I graduated college, I went and got a job in La Costa Resort, one of the beautiful resorts on the water there in Bataquitos Lagoon. I was a busboy, I was a waiter, I was a food runner. I helped the manager with, you know, counting inventory, and eventually was brought over to a restaurant called Addison at the Grand Del Mar. And Addison is the only San Diego restaurant with a Michelin star. Wow. They have 1 Michelin star. I think it's very much worthy of 2. I doubt it's the service that is holding it up. Possibly it's the kitchen. Their menu isn't very adaptable, but neither is the guy who runs the Fat Duck. What is his name? Heston Blumenthal. Heston Blumenthal, he got 3 Michelin stars. You know why? Because he made one menu and he did it perfect. And I guess that's what Addison is going for. They want to have like 16 dishes that are the epitome of what that restaurant is, and every day just kill it. Yeah. And so from there I was a waiter, got my intro and certified, turned into the manager, the general manager of the restaurant, got my advanced exam, and then for the first time took my master in 2012, realizing that I was woefully underprepared. I went for a big goose egg, got no theory, no tasting, no service. And this is back when you actually could take the whole exam as one try, which was really fantastic. Got nothing. The feedback that I received was, why are you a general manager and not running a wine program? And I thought, hey, I'm around a great wine program. I should be able to, in all my, experience, be able to look at this list, our beverage cost, our buying habits, and be able to run a wine program. But that is not the case. You really do have to, make all the mistakes yourself. And so I looked towards somewhere else. I first looked at San Francisco. I looked into distribution to kind of get on that side of the wine game. I was going to go join the team at now I believe it was the number 1 restaurant in the world, Love in Madison Park, and EMP, where they do all kinds of cool service. The only problem is they wanted to pay like $80,000 a year, and living in New York on $80,000 is I think I would live in a rat-infested, roach-infested place, or I would be living with like 6 of my friends, and I'm not really interested in that. So found out, a friend of mine reached out and she's like, hey, would you be interested to go to Las Vegas? I'm leaving my position at Mandarin Oriental and I think you should give it a try. And I said, you know what? I think I could do that. Give me a chance to introduce myself to the, GM and everybody. Actually, this is funny. So when I did my initial interview with the food and beverage director, I had no pants on because I was in San Diego doing one of these on on my computer. I was running late. I got in, took a shower, shaved my face, got my shirt on, got my tie on, and I didn't have time to put my pants on before I had to log in. And so I did my interview, from
COVID style, baby. COVID style. Who needs pants?
You don't know if I'm wearing pants or not, right?
You don't know if I'm wearing pants right now, and I'll tell you what,
Right.
probably not. That's awesome. So you and the Mandarin Oriental all the way up through your master, and then to the military wine company.
Yeah, so I stayed at Mandarin Oriental for another almost 2 years after I passed the master exam, primarily because I recognized that a lot of people leave the floor after they get their MS. Usually it's because you've been on the floor for a dozen or more years. I was 13 years in restaurants, and long nights and sore feet and, angry customers sometimes really get to you. And I was getting married at the time, and I wanted to be around my wife a little more and see her more. And so I stayed for 2 years prior to looking outside of restaurants and hotels, and had the lucky opportunity to have spent a couple great days with Nicholas Miller. We had breakfast together at Somm one year. He had come in on his own to show the wines of J. Wilkes, actually, to me. I love the Chardonnay. I think the first vintage I put on there was probably 2012. I think I might have put on the list at Twist. And then Trey came in again. He showed me the Grenache that they had made in 2011 and 2012 back to back. And I loved the wines. I used to buy so much of it that, they thought we were cooking with it. There was so much going out our door. It was amazing. And, timing is everything, right? It was the right time in my life. It was the right brand. I love the Nacido wines. They literally changed my life. There's no other way to say it.
Now, do you think, was there a wine that killed your pilot dream? Was there a moment due to a wine?
Oh, and I wish there was a story that was as fairy tale as that. I didn't fall in love with like a 1986 Pichon Longueville, which was a very great wine, but that didn't change my life. You know what it was? Flying from Palomar Airport to Las Vegas 3 days a week in a Cessna 152, which it's probably the slowest plane that you can get. The reason that you want to do that is because you want to get your hours up, right? 250 hours is minimum to get a commercial license. So I had to take a slow plane. Well, 3 days a week, I would get off of work, I would go rent a plane, I would fly to Las Vegas. It takes about 2 hours and 20 minutes in a Cessna 152. I would land, I would go have breakfast or lunch or dinner or whatever time of the day it was somewhere, wait until it gets cool, because in the summer you can't take off in the afternoon. You have to wait until it's dark because it's too hot and the density altitude's too high. And I got bored of flying back and forth, and I realized, what is my career going to be? I'm going to be taking off, and especially when you're young, I'm going to be flying from San Diego to Santa Barbara, or San Diego to Palm Springs, or Las Vegas to LAX. Like, that is not a very cool job. And I'm sorry for any of you who are pilots who are watching this. I have great friends who are pilots, and I envy you every day, but I'm happy that I chose something else. And so for me, it was a realization that in wine, you can never stop learning. You are going to, every single day of the year, learn something, whether this is facts about soil or transverse mountain ranges or different clones of Chardonnay or Pinot Gouge, which was a mutation of Pinot Noir in one vineyard in Nuits-Saint-Georges, or whatever. Or now you can learn about distribution, and you can learn about export, and you can learn about all this stuff. The wine industry is never ending. And so for me, it was about being bored in the front cockpit of a plane or being ever entertained for the rest of my life. And that was an easy choice.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a rabbit hole that I have never been for a moment. And I think what we should do is we should jump right into drinking a wine. This is, of course, day drinking. I've been enjoying a beautiful Browery hazy IPA just to keep my blood sugar to a point where I can still talk and not mumble.
Yeah.
But I have the 2015.
15, okay, good.
2015 Santa Maria Valley, obviously Bien Nacido Estate, Pinot Noir. As I open this, and if you want to taste it too, what do you want to say about this wine? And let's start talking a little bit about wine evaluation, just to kind of to set the stage. My main concerns tonight is I want to talk about the difference between how a master sommelier evaluates a wine and a winemaker evaluates a wine, what the difference is, what the purpose is, and in the end, does it do a damn bit of, is it important? Does it have an influence on how we appreciate wine? And then I'd also like to know a little bit, maybe, do you have a notebook? Do you have a grand notebook? Do you have a big notebook? Do you have 45 notebooks from the last 5 years? Let's talk a little bit about wine evaluation.
Okay, so this is very, very interesting, what all of those questions, and I'm going to try. I know we're going to get into them one by one. Hopefully, I don't have to answer them all right now, but this is the truth. I try to write a tasting note the same way that Guy Fieri does his notes when he's in a kitchen on diners, drive-ins, and dives. And it sounds so like cheesy, right, when I say that, but I've broken down, for any of you who want to be the next Food Network star, or want to be the next sommelier or wine writer, this is what you do. You look at it, and then you smell it and taste it and talk about its texture and talk about what jumps out to you. And this is how Guy Fieri does it. If he has a burger, he goes, oh my God, look at the layers. You've got that crispy bun. You've got that perfect melting cheese. And you can see the sauce just oozing out the side. I mean, I can tell that this is a wine that I'm going to have, a hamburger that I'm going to have to lean over to eat. And then he goes, oh, takes a big bite of it. And he's like, oh, it's perfectly warm. And you can feel the texture of that bun. And you can, the crunch of the pickles and the fresh red onions. I mean, you've done something here, right? But what it leaves me with is, did you put cayenne in the burger? Because I get this beautiful spice between, heat, but it's also a little bit more ethereal. And it's almost like this jalapeno kind of thing. And the chef's like, yeah, we did put a little bit of cayenne in there. And he goes, yeah. And the final thing is just how creamy it is. Like, this burger, you didn't do anything wrong with it. It's just so soft and subtle, and like, makes you want to take another bite. And that's how, it's
experiential. It's experiential and not reference-based.
100%. And for me, that's how I evaluate wine, right? So when I look at something like the 2015 Nacido Pinot in the glass, 2015, first off, was a fairly concentrated vintage, right? It was the final year of the drought, where it was really just the most concentrated that it could possibly be. And I kid you not, Pinot Noir should be see-through. If you are putting something like 12% Petit Syrah, or something like, what is the purple, Mega Purple, right?
Purple, or I've been told that a Pinot Noir that starts with an M and ends, I think, with an I, is all about Argentinian Malbec extract, because I know the guy that sells it to some unnamed company that might make a Pinot Noir that starts with an M and ends with an I.
Yeah, and when you have that, the wine is going to be like Pinot for cab drinkers, but Pinot Noir should be see-through. And that wine right there is dark and concentrated for no other reason than the vintage. It was 5 years of drought. It was heat spikes. It was early harvesting. It was everything about what 2015 is. And you can see it in the color. So I go back to that Guy Fieri thing where he's like, you know what? I can see how the bun has that perfect crisp to it. I can see the cheese oozing off the side, right? That is a wine that has cheese oozing off the side because it got so hot that it's softened itself. And you can look at it in the color, right? And this is how, as a sommelier, I would evaluate a wine. I know what Pinot is supposed to look like. I know what Burgundy in Marsanne, in the most northernmost portion of the region, the reason that it's so pink and see-through and pale is because it's closer in temperature to Chablis than it is to something further south like Beaujolais. And so the color is going to reflect that. Willamette Valley Pinots typically have less color than something like Sonoma, or especially like a Napa.
You've frozen on my screen. I'll tell you when you come back.
Balance, right? Too. Wes, you still there? You froze for a second.
You did too. So it's saying that my internet is to blame. So keep on trucking. I'm loving it.
And so I would look at the wine first, and I would see that this wine already has darker colors to it. Now, what does that mean when we eventually put our nose in it and smell it? I am going to typically be looking for hallmarks of Pinot Noir, meaning mostly red fruit, cranberries, raspberries, strawberries, pomegranates, but when you drink that wine, you find that they're not so evident. This is a wine that has more molasses or like boot polish or black cherry or not pomegranate, excuse me, like Twizzler candy kind of thing to it, as opposed to something that's more along the lines of really tart and tangy. And to me, that is evaluation. It's coming from a place of recognition and learning how to see what is differing about this wine. Is it to the left, meaning too cold? Is it to the right, meaning too hot? Or is it just as classic as you'd want it? And then being able to describe that. And to me, you know, people don't know what boot leather is. And to me, that means reduction generally. And it shows a little bit of stem inclusion as well, which I'm not going to write in a tasting note.
Sure.
But I'm going to say something that to me evokes those kind of notes that someone like you, a professional, would know.
Well, thank you for that. I would have to say my question for you would be why, and I'm going to go just check my internet connection. I'm going to just jump away from the camera just as you answer this question for about a minute.
I'm talking to Beth then.
What exactly? Peter and Barney and Beth. Oh, Beth's awesome. And Ian and Jim and Josh and everybody else. Let's make sure we get down to this question. What is the purpose of a tasting note? And if you could never take a tasting note again, how would it impact your appreciation of wine? And I'll be right back.
All right. So to me, the purpose of a tasting note is primarily to be able to share my experience of the wine with someone else. And it only is that. It's not anything else about what the vintage was like, because someone can write about the vintage. It's not about specific flavors. What I try to do is share my experience with the wine and not exactly the tasting notes. And so it's interesting because my tasting note writing has evolved quite a bit over the years. I used to try to focus on sort of color, 3 fruits, 3 non-fruits, something about the barrel and how that, you know, is impacted in the wine, whether it's like cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, whatever, and then finish with something about longevity. Now, that's how a lot of wine writers will generally write a note, because it gives you a lot of information. It gives you about the color. You can see that it's this pale pink hue with cranberry, raspberry, and pomegranate, all crunchy and tart, with this backbone of savory herbs, fresh garrigue, and, you know, wildflowers, and has a hidden spice of cinnamon and clove. I think this wine will age for 10 years plus. And I don't think that that is very emotive for someone reading that. So what I've tended to do in my wisdom that I've had for, you know, the few years that I've been on this earth, is I've tried to write things that change how people feel about the wine. For example, I wrote a note about our Solomon Hills Vin Gris for the 2019 vintage. And the first thing that I talked about was the color of the wine, which is still sort of that rote kind of thing. But the color of our Solomon Hills Vin Gris is this orange, pink, sort of red mix, right? And to me, immediately, I'm thinking about a beautiful sunset. So what am I thinking about? The things that we do when the sun sets out. I might have been grilling outside, barbecuing. I might have been sitting out on my lounge chair watching the sunset. I might have been, you know, thinking about, hey, what's the last great sunset of the year? It's usually right around Halloween, right? When kids are coming up and they're knocking on the door in their cool Tyrannosaurus Rex, you know, costumes. And I write about that in the tasting note first. I want to put people in a space to make them feel, and then I want to say, yeah, it has blood orange, it has grapefruit peel, it has, you know, a light aromatic quality to it of, you know, rose petals, but I don't want to use that as the sole descriptor. And I did that on the floor of restaurants too, because I told people the best part about this wine is how much it's going to make you want to come back again and again and again to drink it. It's so fresh. It's got so much brightness to it that, yeah, it's got a ton of this blueberry, blackberry, cranberry kind of thing, but it's going to make you want to just drink it over and over again. And that made somebody look forward to something and feel something, instead of me just saying it tastes like blackberries and cranberries and raspberries.
Do you have any magic words that you love to use in your tasting notes that seem to appear and you're like, damn, I said it again? Because I love verve. I love cut. I tend to go to cherry, ripe cherry. I talk a lot about raspberry, clove, baking spice. Those were mine. If I stole yours, I apologize. But do you find that just keeps popping up no matter how much you try to find other words in your lexicon?
My thing is that this is everybody's best way to sound like an expert at a dinner party. And I especially say it for red wines. White wines is a little harder. But I look at the wine and then I say fruits that look like it. So if the wine looks like black cherries and plum skin and, black raspberries, I'm going to say those things. Now, as a sommelier, I've learned to recognize the difference between a tart raspberry, a ripe raspberry, a dried raspberry, raspberry powder, raspberry pie, all that stuff. And you want to add that to the note. But at the end of the day, I like to look at the wine and let the wine tell me something about it. If you look at Napa Cab that has a ton of new oak on it, well, it's inky black, see-through, not see-through, opaque completely. And what do I think of that immediately? I think of like blueberry jam from, sitting in the back of my pantry. Like I think of molasses. I think of things that are concentrated and dense, and sure, it's, the tail wagging the dog. But at the end of the day, it's giving me more of a vocabulary to talk about than just trying to come up with, 6 or 7 fruits that I might come off the top of my head with.
Did you mention why the hell a tasting note matters? To transfer, what I heard was, and I'm using my own language, that a tasting note, and this is true for me too, the purpose is the same reason I would write a poem. I've got some interesting idea in my head and I want to transfer it from my head to your head. How can I transfer extra genetic information between me and you without, us being related? And the answer is language. So language is the way that we do this. So I would say that it is a tasting note, like a poem, is a vehicle to get the experience from my body to yours.
Right.
Anything that you would add to that?
You know how plagiarism is illegal and definitely frowned upon? You come from the education space, right?
Right.
If we asked all wine writers and all winemakers and all wine professionals to write poetry about the wine and not use cranberry, raspberry, pomegranate, I think we would have a beautiful lexicon of language to speak about wine that is emotive as opposed to descriptive. And that's what I try to get to when I was a sommelier. I wanted to make people feel like they could tell what was going to happen when I opened the bottle, because in some cases it's a $500,000 bottle. And once I pull that cork, you can't ever go back, and I'm going to eat the cost, right? If I didn't describe that experience well. And so to me, I think it's exactly right, Wes. You should write a poem about the wine. Let's not get to the point of, having too much metaphor, right? But at some
WineX, do you remember WineX magazine? Do you remember that? The WineX magazine would come out and they would give like 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, and then their reviews would be like, it's like Madonna in a bathtub full of honey. Right. And they wouldn't explain it. It was so analogous that it was meaningless.
So was it Madonna with the pokey?
I don't want to necessarily
like a virgin dressed in a nun's outfit. Like
I remember her from my junior year of high school in 1985, 1986 with the white, sort of lace gloves, sort of the early Madonna, but that was just me. Do you think Brits write better tasting notes? Would you take a Broadbent or a Jancis Robinson note over, obviously, when I think of American wine critics, I think generally of James Laube. I think of Robert Parker. Obviously, Antonio is not American, so he might have American citizenship, but I know that he identifies probably with his.
I don't have an opinion, to be quite honest. If I said anything about my looking at the Brits in general, I would generally say that they're a little more buttoned up, which I don't think is, me saying anything out of line here. I would say that I'm guessing that some of the tasting notes of Decanter magazine or the Financial Times or Purple Pages or, you know, any of the other European and UK publications probably are a little more descriptive. And, you know, I would, this is only a criticism that I think we could find a different language that of emotion to talk about wine. And, you know, the funny thing is, though, emotion changes with the weather. Emotion changes with the, you know, time of day. Emotion changes with Friday versus Monday, right? And I guess that's why description is used, and words like cranberry, cherry, raspberry, you know, rose petals and garrigue, as opposed to something more emotive. But why wouldn't I want to read a tasting note that someone wrote on a Friday afternoon at sunset and then drink that wine on a Monday after a hard day and think about how they felt on Friday, you know?
Yeah, no, and I think it's so important to understand now. What I want to talk about for just 1 second, then I've got a question. Is, I guess this would kind of fall into it. How does one go from an enthusiast palate? What's the difference? I think this is a better question. What is the difference between an enthusiast palate and a master somms palate? But I mean, okay.
So I can likely tell you the percentage of new oak on a said wine. If you pour it for me, blind, without even telling me what region it's from, what grape it is, if it has some presence of new oak to it, I can likely pick it up and say, from my understanding of Pinot Noir as a classic in the world, Syrah is a classic, Cabernet is a classic, Merlot, Pinotage, whatever, I can say, so did you put 40% new oak on this wine? And was it medium plus toast? And did you use Francois Frere barrels? That is a master sommelier, and that is more than an enthusiast. An enthusiast might say, wow, I get this cool mocha kind of thing on the back end, which, yeah, that's medium plus toast. Yeah, for sure, that's Francois Frere barrels. And for sure, that's a high percentage of new oak on something like Pinot Noir. But to go deeper into why and how and quantify it specifically, 30%, 20%, 100%, 100% malolactic, 60% malolactic, stem inclusion, right? 30%, 100% stems. All of that is what we as master sommeliers are training our palates to do, and all through that ripeness scale as well. You know, my mom, I love her. The other day, she said, hey, I tasted the Solomon Hills Chardonnay, and it was so sweet. And I go, like, my head goes 3.12 pH, completely dry, like laser beam wine. And I'm like, she said it was sweet. So I'm like, I don't know what the hell's going on.
Well, that's, you know, I know a lot of people taste wines that they love and they say, wow, it's so soft. And I made the wine and I'm like, ow, 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 ow. But I get that they're giving it a compliment. So I think that Americans talk, do you agree with me that Americans talk about wine too much? Because when I go to France, when I go to Italy, I mean, let me tell you a quick story about the Domaine de la Romanée-Conti. Have I told you this story before? So I got invited to DRC back. I want to make sure I give you the accurate. It was 2005. And we had a friend named Charles Haley. Charles Hanley. He had died 2 years after, but he was 92 years old and he was a World War II vet. He liberated Dachau. And in liberating Dachau, he found this poor little 75-pound Jewish man who all he could croak was, in French, bring me back to Clos Vougeot.
Wow.
Bring me back to Clos Vougeot. Turns out he was like the 6th generation cellar master at Clos Vougeot. And this guy, Charles, drove him all the way back to Burgundy from Dachau, dropped him off. And all of a sudden, everyone was like, oh my gosh, we thought he was dead, right? You know, so obviously Charles became a Burgundian wine importer. And using his name opens doors in Burgundy you can't imagine. So folks got Charles to write a letter to Aubert de Villaine saying, our friends, the Pepys and Hagens, are coming to Burgundy. Would you welcome them at the Domaine? And Aubert said, yep, come on in. So we got to go in. Not only did we get to taste barrels, but we got to have dinner with Aubert and his friends. and his beautiful Santa Barbara wife with my beautiful Santa Barbara wife. So everything worked out just fine. Cut to the chase, 4 hours at table, 6 figures in wines going back to 1962, La Tâche, Echezeaux, Romani Conti, Grand Echezeaux, you name it, great vintages all the way across. They did not hold back. I was sitting there, of course, as an American, figuring out how much money was on the table. Well, that's about a $7,000 bottle. That's about a $9,000 bottle. That could be $2,000, whatever. I kept asking myself, when will these vignerons, when will these like elite Burgundian wine producers stop and tell us something about these wines? Hour in, they're talking about their dogs. 2 hours in, they're talking about their kids. 3 hours in, they're talking about the vintage. Finally, at the end of the table, before we put napkins on our head and do the fa la la's, Aubert stands up and says, I should actually say something about the wine for our American friends. Shunk. And what I realized, if I hadn't have been there, they wouldn't have said a damn thing about $100,000 worth of wine that they were converting to Europe.
Yeah.
And beautiful. I wish I could drink $100,000 worth of wine and not have to make I'm probably a little too narcissistic to not at least have to say something. But that was a moment I'll never forget. And Aubert said something else at the California Club, Eric Moe tasting. I was sitting at a tasting of the 1995 vintage, and I was taking very detailed notes. This is very apropos to the conversation of notes. I was taking notes on every single one of the 1995 DRC wines. We got to taste them all with Wilson Daniels. And so I'm sitting there taking notes, and because I'm a vineyard manager at Clopeppi and a winemaker, they decided to put me next to Aubert. So Aubert is once in a while, he's tasting the wine, taking a little nibble of the appetizers, and he's watching me very carefully take all the notes. And once in a while, I actually catch him reading what I'm writing. I get past the Echezeaux, past the La Tâche. They bring the Romani Conti, brand new Romani Conti, tasting it in probably 3 years after vintage. I swirl the wine. I put my nose in it. By the way, after the rest of the people left, I brought a portable pH meter and I took readings of all the wines. Wow. That was my problem. When I tasted the Romani Conti, my pen went like this. I said, fuck. I might have put a C and a K at the end. I don't remember. Aubert de Villaine saw me take this note and looked over at me and said, Monsieur, that is the first honest note you've taken all night.
Right.
Fuck.
And this is the thing. I also had an experience with Aubert de Villaine. I drove around with him in Central Otago in New Zealand for a day and a half while he was down there researching for the UNESCO World Heritage Site, because they were putting Burgundy up and looking at other great Pinot Noir regions of the world. And we drank a bunch of 2008 because it was at the International Pinot Noir Festival in Central Otago that year. I didn't take any notes that I really care to go back and look at. But you know what? I remember what I drank there because I was remembering the experience. And I remember the 2 times in my life that I've had La Loubize domain wines, which are called, why is it escaping me? You know why? Because I had enough cocktail already that my brain stopped starting to slow down.
Remember, alcohol just works like a lion on a slow zebra. It just takes out the slowest brain cells and allows the better brain cells to come back.
There are many wines that I remember having that I could probably think back and remember like the texture of the wine and how the acid was affecting me and how the oxidation might have been on a bottle or how much, fruit might have been showing. But I can sit around and I can close my eyes and I can go, okay, so Matt Nino was sitting there and Jeremy Young was sitting there and Molly was sitting there and my wife Yvette was sitting there and Greg Gregory was sitting there. And I know who was sitting at every single seat around the table when we drank the 3rd bottle I ever tried at the same restaurant, Burns Steakhouse, of 1978 La Romane from Ligier Belair. I can remember that experience and who was with me. And I can remember the first time and I can remember the second time and the 3rd time I had that bottle. But you know what? If you ask me about the tasting notes, I really don't have it. And getting back to one of the things you brought up before, you're like, do you have stacks of books this big? And not at all. Not at all. Because as a master sommelier, what we have been trained to do, and I want to mention one thing that I saw in the notes. It said, hey, Wes, Why isn't Facebook working?
Oh, crap. Really?
So we might have an audience of 12, and so this is for all of you. I'll let Wes work on it.
I will. Go ahead, sir.
As a master sommelier, I could have a book, and I think about restaurants like Taillevent, right? If you're not familiar with Taillevent, it's a now 2 Michelin star restaurant in Paris. It has one of those wine lists that is literally this big. They bring it over to the table on its own stand so that you can look through it, and they have 75 vintages of Chinon from whatever great producer, and any bottle that you want to get, you can buy there, and it's cheap because they've got a cellar that's so deep. But do you think that those sommeliers are coming over to the table, and I'm going to ask them, excuse me, I wanted to have the Marquis de Terme 1961 Margaux. How does that wine taste? And if they had those lists, they could go, well, let me go consult my list real quick. And then they would go back, and then they would bring you the note, and they'd say, Monsieur, read my note, which is in scribbled French, right? That note has nothing to do with the fact that a sommelier needs to, on the fly, be able to say, oh, the 1961 Marquis de Terme, to be quite honest, it's still quite young. Where you would expect something like 1982 to be way too young to drink right now, the 61 is just starting to hit a peak. And I'm talking about this from a cellar like Taillevent, which is going to be one of the best in the world. The bottles never move unless they are sold. They need to have that experience to be able to say, oh yeah, I tasted it. Let me remember. I think I tried it 15 years ago. And I think I may have tried it. Oh yes, I remember that one night the winemaker from Champagne-en-Somme came in, and he ordered a bottle of this as well. And yeah, I mean, I think it's in a pretty great place right now.
So now I know what the winemaker at Salos drinks when he's not drinking one of the greatest champagnes in the world. We are live on Facebook, and if we weren't live on Facebook, I am going to, obviously I've been recording this, so we'll put it up to make sure that lots of people can see that less. Yes, of course. Apologize, Jim, that was kind of a pain in the butt. I want to get to a little bit of, if you, do you have some of the 15 Bien Nacido Pinot Noir?
If you want to tell a cool story, I can pull some out right now.
Yes, of course I will. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and show you guys how I would take a tasting note on this wine. This is the 2015 Bien Nacido Pinot Noir. Normally, what I'll do is I'll put V, N, M, and match. V for visual, N for nose, M for mouth, match for what I want to eat with it. And then I'm going to start by also, as you guys will see, I've got it broken. I've got a mostly broken pinky, and I probably just screwed it up. But I'm using basically Wine Folly, and it has this really cool chart that you can see that has basically a number of the references. I don't use the references unless I need them. So what I do is if I get stuck, what is that I'm smelling? I will remind myself by looking at an aroma chart. So as far as the visual, what I'm going to say is this is a brilliant, even though this was not filtered. I don't like to use the word unfiltered because it sounds like the wine was filtered and then it was unfiltered. So this is non-filtered wine. Although I would say the clarity is pretty damn close to brilliant. I don't see any difference between this and a regularly filtered wine. I would call the color medium garnet with a plus after it because it's actually very close to a very heavy garnet color because of the vintage. And then in the nose, I would say it is more spice and earth driven with a very juicy edge. If I wanted to use references, even though I don't like to use a lot of references in the wine, clearly a little bit of raspberry jam, a little bit of ripe cherry, definitely some baking spice, maybe a little bit of cinnamon and clove, a little bit of vanilla as well. And in the mouth, first word I would use is harmonious. The wine sings. Not only is it a great vintage, not only has it had 4 years or 3.5 years probably in bottle to sort of come together and begin to knit together, this wine is showing why do you pay $50 or more for a bottle of wine? Because it better sing. Because if it doesn't sing for its supper, I'm asking, why didn't I buy a $2 chuck? Why didn't I buy just a nice bottle of $10 Grenache? This wine has complexity. This wine has a soul. This wine speaks to me of place. It's got loaminess and beautiful acidity without it being acidic. Like you would never know, the word acid would never come to your mind while drinking this. But if you're a winemaker, you start playing around with, even though the wine is broad, delicious, and juicy, its pH is probably 3.38. Titratable acidity is probably almost 7. This wine has soul, it has verve, it has liveliness. And what I would match it with, I mean, I'm thinking of cream of chanterelle soup with chanterelles pulled out of the Santa Rita Hills with just a little bit of sherry, a little bit maybe some shallots sweated down with the mushrooms, and then a good hit of and then put it in a food processor with some stock and some butter and some cream. My goodness, I can't imagine. Also, duck confit. I wouldn't do this with a sticky duck, but I would certainly do it with a savory duck. How would you evaluate this wine or make a note on this wine? And I did not go experiential.
Yeah, so the first thing I would do is I'd look at the wine, and again, I'd see how dark it is, and I would see also, yes, this is unfiltered. It has this hue glow to it from the fact that it is unfiltered, right? And this is a compliment to Trey Fletcher, who made the wine, that the wine isn't obviously flocculated, right? It's not like this wine has stuff floating around in it. He did an incredible job at racking it, but yes, there is that little hue, and that just comes from time and bottle, right? I bet you this bottle, when it was first put there, it didn't have that hue. This just comes from polymerization of tannins kind of falling out of suspension. But the first thing I would do is I'd look at it and I'd see how concentrated it is, thinking, wow, this is more towards the color of really warm vintage Gamay, or more towards even something like Syrah, because of the fact of how dark it is. And then immediately I'd put it in my nose and I would think, okay, for me, this wine is brooding. It is savory. It is intense. It's masculine. And I can just tell that from the nose, because for my own tasting experience, it's on like a line graph, right? Low end, very delicate, sort of feminine. And, I'll only use that word because it describes all the things I love in the world, feminine. And then you have this masculine, sort of powerful, brooding, broad-shouldered kind of thing, right? And I look at them as sort of polar opposites. They can, in ways, go sine and cosine and come in and out. But this wine, to me, seems much more brooding. It is about, moist soil. It is about, really, it has this lightly confected, when you are caramelizing onions and you haven't moved them in 6 or 7 minutes, and you just get a little bit of that black char on your onion, even in the pan, it stops sweating and now it's just starting to caramelize. It gives me that confected quality. It makes it more towards right now I get this brown sugar quality out of the wine. All of these things that tell me that this wine has more structure, more richness, more concentration to it than anything about the fruits. I mean, the fruits I'm imagining are going to be more confected as well. This wine also does have a little bit of, something that Bien Nacido wines always have is reduction. We don't use a lot of sulfur in the wine, so we're not putting a bunch of sulfur to make it age for a long time, but we are bottling with a lot of CO2. And so that CO2 itself lends towards a oxygen-free environment, which sometimes can show as that, like I said earlier, bootstrap or boot molasses, or excuse me, boot polish.
Sure.
See, but it's a totally different wine on the palate. You put it on the palate, and yeah, it goes broad. Even from the front to the back, it's kind of broad all the way through. It's not a laser beam. It's not all about acid. It's broad all the way. But the funny thing is, it's so delicate. It's so light. It's so uplifting. It's a wine where I wanted to on the nose. And when you said chanterelle mushrooms, that's so much more appropriate dish from what the nose says. The nose says I want oyster mushrooms reduced in a dashi broth with soy sauce and all of these umami savory things.
I think you just gave Greg Brewer a boner, but anyways.
And then you put it on your palate and you go, oh no, this is so much lighter. To me, this goes more towards, I think about chicken first. I like duck too, but I don't really cook duck at home. So I hate to bring it up as something people should eat. Cause I'm not good at making a duck breast, but like, let's say chicken with some sort of like vinegar barbecue sauce where the vinegar is talking to you more than the sugar in like a ketchup kind of situation would be, right? Because it matches how light and delicate this wine is. You add vinegar to a dish to brighten it up and to bring it back from being too salty and too savory and too whatever, right? This to me screams vinegar. So I would want to do like a roasted piece of chicken, just sliced right off of the carcass. I would want to glaze it afterwards with some sort of like vinegar barbecue sauce, put it back under the broiler so it gets a little bit blackened, right? Where it starts to bring on some of that more umami savory flavor. And I would have this with something very simple and green and herbaceous along the side, like broccoli rabe or kale or like mustard greens, or this even makes me think of like the South, right? Like collard greens with like bacon. That would be fantastic.
How about like a Carolina pig barbecue with some vinegar sop and some green. There's a great barbecue restaurant in DC called the DC Smokehouse that I understand that they based the House of Cards barbecue restaurant on. It's in a part of the town that you would normally be very careful in being in, but it's one of the best barbecue joints I've ever been in outside of Austin or Kansas City and all that good stuff.
And, going back to your point, Wes, about what we're talking about today, right? Tasting notes. This is a wine that is so difficult to write a tasting note about because the nose and the palate are so different to each other. And it's that sine and cosine thing, right? On the nose, this says to me umami, savory, funky earth, mushroom, power. And on the palate, it says, give me vinegar, give me something light. I don't want to drink this in the middle of winter. I want to drink this in Las Vegas when it's 96 degrees outside in the summer. This is a light, ethereal wine. And to have those two come together from the nose to the palate and be so, I guess you'd say contradictory, but complementary. Like, how can you write a tasting note about that in 60 words or 45 words or however many words somebody writes a tasting note?
To me, it's like writing a tasting note on Montrachet, because Montrachet is dessert wine in the nose and the driest, most amazingly mineral wine you've ever tasted on the mouth. You smell Montrachet and you think there's going to be 8% residual sugar because of the intensity of the nose. And I think that's what tasting notes can help us do, is ground us in the idea. To me, I was going to ask this quick question and then we need to get on because we're having such a good time. Time is fleeting. Have you ever gone back and how often do you go back and read a tasting note? Because I have taken thousands of tasting notes. I've read my own tasting notes online when someone else was like, hey, check out this tasting note Wes did, because I want to check out what I wrote to make sure I didn't sound like an idiot. But I don't know if I have ever gone back, because I keep taking these tasting notes on every wine I make and every barrel I make, thinking sometime I'll go and put them in a chart or something and make a bar graph of intensity, concentration, and fruit character in the wines I've made. I've never done it. How often do you go back to a tasting note?
Easy answer is never.
Yeah.
The only place that I see this appropriate is when in 10 years, when it's 2030, and we're looking back at a 10-year lineup of the 2028, 27, 26, all the way back to 2015 vintage, saying, oh yeah, I did a tasting note on 6/5/2020 on how this wine was showing. Let's see how it's different today. I think wine, and we know this, is such a single moment kind of thing. And going back to my whole point about emotion, right? Right now it's Friday evening. Hallelujah to Friday, right? And we are having a great bottle of wine together. I want to remember this. Yeah, I want to remember how it shows, but I want to remember next time I open a 2015 Nacido Pinot, I want to go, oh yeah, the last time I had this was Wes and I doing a Zoom, and you know what? It was tasting like this. I don't want to have to read that note. I just want to go back to that memory of you and I and hope that some of that emotion of the wine comes through.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Let's back it up and say there's probably some people watching that really want to know sort of how in their in their sort of beginning or intermediary appreciation of wine, how tasting notes will help them. Do you have any suggestions for people that are just coming up in wine or want to learn about wine? Should they take notes? Should they just shut the hell up and drink? What do you think?
No. Use your experience and trust that the winemaker or the note writer or the critic recognizes common human experience. If you have ever eaten a green strawberry, they're fantastic in a spring salad, but they don't taste like an end of summer strawberry. Someone who writes green strawberry in a tasting note is generally trying to tell you something about ripeness of fruit. They're generally telling you that this vintage or this wine or something was harvested early and it tends to have a tart, astringent character to it. So read the notes and use your own experience. If you like green zebra tomatoes and green strawberries and pomegranates and cranberries and raspberries, like I do, I like high acid fruits and high acid vegetables and those kind of things, I'm going to look for those kind of tasting notes. Whereas if somebody puts something like blackstrap molasses, blueberry jam, sweet pastry, like, vanilla all over it, I'm going to recognize that they're talking about a wine that is almost on the other end of the spectrum from what I typically like. Now, if there's a balance of them in between, like this wine would have, I'd hope that they could notice that there's a little bit of the savory and a little bit of the sweet balancing together to give you something in the middle. And that's the best way to read a tasting note. If you're trying to find something that you like, look for the flavors that you like in a wine, or even the fruits and vegetables that you like to eat, and see if that's found in your tasting note.
I think if you were going to write a 1-word tasting note for this wine, because I've got mine, and you won't be disappointed.
Like a bunch of words come to my head. The first one is savory. The second one is like unctuous. The third one tends to be like fuzzy. I guess I'd say sauvage, which, the French they've been using their language, writing beautiful poetry for so long. Sauvage to me is what this wine is. It's wild.
Yes.
I guess that's the best way to say it.
And I love, because at that stem inclusion at the edge of perception, I think you're absolutely right. My 1 word was miraculous, because I want to bring that wine to Burgundy to find that one guy who says California can't grow Pinot Noir and do that. All right. So we are just about 4 minutes out. So we are ready for the speed round. Are you ready for the speed round? Because if you win this speed round, you are going to win a fabulous prize given to you by the same company that actually employs you.
I get to finish the rest of this bottle?
You get to finish the bottle without paying for your samples. All right, we've got 10 questions on the speed round, and we got 1 bonus question, and I'll tell you if you're right or wrong. The bravest pilot in history: Charles Lindbergh, Amelia Earhart, Bessie Coleman, or Buzz Aldrin?
I'd say Lindbergh.
You are correct. Prop or jet if you flew once a week?
I would want a Citation 10 is the best.
There you go. That's a jet, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Foie gras or caviar?
Neither.
Okay. Maybe the first Somm I've heard that, and I'm not a fan of either. So I'm still trying to figure it out. I can do oysters. I just don't really like either of those. Southwestern.
If we're doing foie gras terrine, I would take terrine over seared foie gras. So I get foie gras.
Okay. I like a little seared foie gras, like a little kind of Vegas dice style, a little honey, a little sea salt. Southwest or United?
Southwest for sure.
That's correct. Hilton or Hyatt?
I usually stay in a Red Roof Inn.
Yeah, we both are careful with our expenses. You can only have one for the rest of your life: Riesling or Pinot Noir?
Riesling.
That is correct for a master sommelier. No other answer would have been. Yes, that's absolutely correct.
Pinot Noir isn't sweet. That's why I can't have a dessert Pinot.
Michael Jordan would love you right now.
Actually,
Okay.
I take that back. Ratafia from Champagne is a dessert-style Vin de liqueur, so Pinot Noir works, but I still choose Riesling.
Okay, so you took Riesling, which takes us to the next round, which is you only get to keep one, Riesling or Champagne.
Riesling, because Champagne gives me acid reflux.
Okay, and you can also do a sect. I'll give you a yes on that. Wine, beer, or cocktails? One has to go. Which is it?
Beer, because
Okay.
it makes me bloated.
That's okay. That's a tough call, but that's a wrong answer. But I appreciate your sentiment. Dogs over. If you're gonna only have a dog, is it under or over 40 pounds?
Under 40 pounds.
Under 40 pounds. He likes manageable. Best town for a 20-something: San Diego, Paris, or Vegas?
Vegas is going to be the answer.
You're wrong. It's San Diego, but that's okay. I appreciate your help. I was at 20s in San Diego, and I'm still suffering. I think you can go to Paris, or you can go to San Diego when you're 19, and you can wake up when you're 30 with a hangover and just realize you just probably had the best decade of your life.
I left when I was 30, and I grew up. I was in San Diego when I was 5 all the way to 30, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. But man, you could sure have a lot of fun in Vegas. But you'd have to be a very, very calm individual, because you could go way overboard here.
It's absolutely true. As far as I think both are the two of the best cities, Vegas and San Diego, two of the best cities in the United States to be in hospitality, because you'll never be lonely and you'll never be broke. Well, post-COVID. And this is your bonus question, Flyboy. IFR or VFR?
Oh, IFR for sure.
Dude, you must be good.
But I mean, I never want to. I'll tell you a quick story, because I know we're running out of time. Yep. Before I had my IFR rating, I was taking my girlfriend.
You tell people what an IFR is?
IFR is instrument flight rating. And so you can fly in clouds essentially and land without being able to see a lot. You still can't see nothing, right? Because you need to have what's called decision height and make a decision on whether you can see the runway and land. But I took my girlfriend, her best friend, and her boyfriend at the time in a 4-seater plane up to Santa Barbara. Well, we know what Santa Barbara is like, foggy. And you know what? I took off. I got there. I couldn't land because I didn't have my instrument rating. And you know what? I felt like an asshole. But I did turn it around. We landed at Catalina, which was a pretty good day, because Catalina looked great. So we made it a good day, but I was disappointed that I couldn't land in Santa Barbara and go show them Santa Barbara. So IFR all the way.
That's Studley. IFR, instrument flight rules. VFR, visual flight rules, whether you have to see or not see. There's a great video online of a guy landing a 787 in either Macau or Hong Kong, where literally he cannot see. He's flying one of the greatest airplanes in the world, and he cannot see the lights on the runway until he's literally like 100 feet low. It's definitely heroic. And
do you know which airport you can land at 000, which means zero visibility, left, right, or front, back? It's the only one in America that if there was a severe storm, that they would send every single plane possible. And you've been there.
Would it be San Francisco?
No. San Francisco's not big enough. It's Denver. So first off, there's plenty of place to park airplanes. They have something called MLS, which is microwave landing system. Microwave landing system, if your plane, and most planes are equipped with it, can land in zero visibility. You can land with zero front, zero left, zero right, zero up, down. You can completely take the plane all the way down to the ground. And the great thing is they have really long runways and plenty of places to park planes. So it's the one place that in severe storms that they would be able to send an airplane.
Well, obviously it's one of the great airports in the world that I've been to, but I hate flying into it just because it's one of the places I've got sick, because it's a long, very bumpy kind of entrance in. Well, thank you so much for all of your expertise, all of your answers, sharing it with all of our people. I'll make sure, Nacido, I will make sure to post the entire recorded version of this up on on Facebook to make sure everyone has an opportunity to see it. We'll throw it up on our YouTube channel. Make sure to go over to the Miller Family Wine Company. Check out all the wines that we have for sale, jwilkes.com, and of course, Bien Nacido and Solomon Hills. Is there any, you want to share the website for if people want to buy, I don't think they can buy the 15, but what's the current release on the website for the Pinot Noir?
They can buy some of the 15 if they're in California and some of our early states. But Bien Nacido Estate, BIENNACIDO estate.com. I think there are plenty of cool tasting notes that I've written over the years for some of the wines on there that you'll get a kick out of. So I think this is great. Happy Friday, Wes.
Happy Friday to you, brother. And have a fantastic weekend. Get some relaxation in.
And
Love to your wife. Loves to your puppies. And we get to order takeout for Fridays and Sundays. So I'm about to figure out what the hell I'm going to eat, and I don't have to cook. So I'm rather happy about that. Take good care, and we'll talk again soon. What a fabulous conversation. Thanks again. Cheers.
Cheers.